When someone stops valuing you, the first instinct is usually to speak more, explain more, and justify yourself. You try to remind them of everything you've done, how loyal you've been, how much you care. You think if they truly understood your intentions, they would treat you differently. But the truth is, the moment you start explaining your worth, you quietly lower it. Value is not something you argue for. It's something that's felt. The more you try to convince someone to see you a certain way, the more you reveal that you don't believe it yourself. And people respond to that energy instantly. They may listen, they may nod, but respect doesn't come back. Attraction doesn't grow, because confidence never needs a defense. When you explain yourself to someone who has already pulled back, you're reacting to their perception instead of standing in your own. That puts them in control. You're adjusting your behavior to earn validation, and that shifts the dynamic against you. Instead of being seen as grounded and self-assured, you become someone seeking approval. Most people don't stop valuing you because they misunderstand your intentions. They stop valuing you because the dynamic has changed. Comfort replaced mystery. Availability replaced presence. Predictability replaced depth. None of those things are fixed through words. They're corrected through behavior. Explaining your worth also places emotional pressure on the other person. It asks them to respond in a certain way, to reassure you, to restore something that should never have been handed over in the first place. Pressure creates resistance. The more you push for recognition, the more distance you create. Silence, on the other hand, removes that pressure. When you stop explaining, you stop negotiating. You're no longer asking to be seen differently. You're simply being. And that shift creates space for reevaluation. When there's no defense to push against, the mind naturally reflects. There's also a deeper cost to over-explaining that most people overlook. Every time you try to prove your value, you train yourself to doubt it. You condition yourself to believe that your worth depends on being acknowledged. Over time, that erodes your self-respect. And once self-respect is gone, no external validation can replace it. Choosing not to explain doesn't mean you're cold or unkind. It means you trust your value enough not to plead for recognition. It means you understand that someone who truly values you doesn't need convincing. They feel it without being told. This approach also protects your emotional stability. When you stop trying to control how someone sees you, you regain control over how you see yourself. You stop replaying conversations, crafting messages in your head, or waiting for the right words to fix things. You let go of the illusion that clarity creates connection. From the outside, this looks like confidence. From the inside, it feels like relief. You're no longer performing. You're no longer chasing understanding. You're simply standing where you are, grounded and steady. And here's the shift that surprises most people. When you stop explaining your worth, it often becomes more visible. Distance replaces familiarity. Presence replaces noise. And sometimes in that quiet space, respect either returns naturally or reveals that it was never there to begin with. Either way, you win, because the moment you stop explaining your worth is the moment you start honoring it. When you sense that someone no longer values you, the natural reaction is to pull away emotionally. You shut down, become cold, or detach out of frustration. While this might protect you temporarily, it often carries bitterness underneath, and bitterness is still emotional attachment. The real shift doesn't come from cutting off emotion. It comes from reclaiming where your attention goes. Attention is currency. Where you place it determines what grows in your life. When someone stops valuing you but still receives your focus, energy, and availability, the imbalance deepens. They learn, consciously or not, that your presence is guaranteed regardless of how they treat you. Pulling your attention back corrects this imbalance without conflict. This doesn't mean you become distant or disrespectful. It means you stop over-investing. You respond instead of react. You engage without chasing. You remain polite and composed, but you're no longer leading with emotional urgency. That subtle change speaks louder than confrontation ever could. Most people confuse emotional withdrawal with strength. In reality, emotional shutdown often comes from hurt. It's defensive, not grounded. Pulling your attention back is different. It's intentional. You're still emotionally centered, but you're no longer feeding a dynamic that no longer nourishes you. When attention shifts, perception shifts. Suddenly, your absence is felt. Not because you announced it, but because it's no longer freely given. This creates contrast. And contrast is what brings awareness back to value. When someone has to notice a change instead of being told about it, the realization hits deeper. Pulling attention back also forces you to return to yourself. You stop monitoring their behavior and start observing your own life again. Your focus moves to your goals, routines, and growth. This internal shift stabilizes you. You're no longer waiting for signals, replies, or validation to feel grounded. From their perspective, this change creates uncertainty, not confusion, but awareness. The dynamic feels different. You're no longer emotionally available on demand. There's no anger, no explanation, just a quiet shift in engagement. That's often enough to disrupt complacency. Another important aspect is consistency. Pulling attention back works when it's clean and steady, not hot and cold, not dramatic one day and engaged the next. Consistency communicates self-respect. It says you know your value and you don't need to advertise it. This approach also protects your dignity. You're not asking for better treatment. You're responding to reality. When someone values you, your attention flows naturally. When they don't, you redirect it without resentment. That balance keeps you in control. Over time, one of two things happens. Either they recalibrate and begin to engage with more intention, or the distance reveals that the connection was one-sided. Both outcomes are clarity, and clarity is power. The key is remembering that attention should be earned, not given out of habit or fear. When you pull your attention back without pulling your emotions apart, you maintain your center, and that's when dynamics begin to change naturally. When someone's behavior toward you starts to change, most people change right along with it. They become warmer when attention returns and colder when it disappears. One day they're invested, the next they're distant. This emotional swing feels natural, but it quietly erodes respect. Inconsistency signals that your stability depends on how you're being treated in the moment, and when that happens, you lose authority over the dynamic. Respect is built on predictability, not availability. When your behavior constantly adjusts to someone else's mood or effort, you appear reactive rather than grounded. Even if your intentions are good, the message being sent is that your center is external. People sense this instinctively, and once they do, the dynamic shifts away from equality. Becoming consistent doesn't mean tolerating poor treatment. It means choosing a steady way of showing up regardless of emotional fluctuations. You don't reward neglect with increased effort, and you don't punish inconsistency with emotional withdrawal. You remain calm, measured, and aligned with your values. This creates a baseline of behavior that others have to respond to rather than control. Consistency also removes emotional confusion. When you stop reacting, you start observing. You notice patterns instead of moments. You see whether someone's effort is real or temporary, intentional or convenient. Emotional reactions blur judgment. Consistency sharpens it. Many people believe that showing strong emotions proves sincerity. In reality, emotional volatility often communicates insecurity. The person who stays steady during uncertainty appears confident, even when they say very little. Calm consistency signals that your self-worth isn't on trial. You don't need to convince anyone of it. From the outside, consistency feels like strength. Your tone doesn't change. Your availability doesn't spike suddenly. Your standards don't soften under pressure. This doesn't create distance, it creates clarity. People know where they stand with you because you don't shift with every emotional breeze. Another powerful effect of consistency is that it restores balance. When someone stops valuing you, the imbalance usually comes from unequal effort. By maintaining your steady behavior and refusing to overcompensate, you stop feeding that imbalance. You're no longer filling gaps that aren't yours to fill. Consistency also protects your energy. Emotional reactions are exhausting. They pull you into overthinking, replaying conversations, and anticipating outcomes. When you choose consistency, you conserve mental space. You become less invested in controlling how things unfold and more focused on how you show up. Over time, this approach forces a response. Either the other person adjusts and meets your level of consistency, or they drift further away. Both outcomes are information, and information is power. You no longer guess where you stand, you see it clearly. The key is understanding that respect doesn't come from intensity, it comes from reliability. When you stay steady while others fluctuate, you naturally reclaim authority over the dynamic. And in that steadiness, you either rebuild respect or gain the clarity needed to move forward without regret. When someone no longer values you, it's often because they've grown comfortable with the version of you they already know. Familiarity sets in, effort becomes optional, and respect slowly fades. Trying to fix this by demanding attention or explaining your feelings keeps you stuck in the same position. Real change happens when you evolve beyond the version of yourself they stopped valuing. Self-expansion isn't about proving anything to them. It's about refusing to stay static. When you grow mentally, physically, emotionally, or professionally, the dynamic changes naturally. Growth creates distance, and distance restores perspective. People don't value what feels stagnant or predictable. They value what feels alive, moving, and evolving. Most people make the mistake of shrinking when they feel undervalued. They give more time, more effort, more emotional access, hoping it will bring appreciation back. In reality, overgiving reinforces the imbalance. Expansion does the opposite. It redirects your energy into areas that build confidence and momentum instead of seeking validation. As you invest in yourself, your identity shifts, your days become fuller, your priorities become clearer. You're no longer waiting for someone to notice you because you're busy building something that matters to you. This internal shift is powerful because it changes how you show up without you trying to change anything externally. Growth also changes how you carry yourself. Your posture, tone, and presence subtly improve when your life is moving forward. You become less reactive because your sense of fulfillment isn't tied to one person's behavior. This calm confidence is noticeable. It's not forced, it's a byproduct of progress. From the other person's perspective, this shift can be surprising. The version of you they felt comfortable underestimating no longer exists. You're no longer available in the same way. You're more selective with your time. You're less predictable. That unpredictability isn't chaos, it's evolution. And evolution demands reassessment. Self-expansion also raises your standards. As you grow, you become more aware of what you will and won't accept. You're no longer trying to earn respect, you expect it. And expectations, when backed by action, quietly reshape dynamics. This isn't about becoming distant or superior. It's about alignment. When your life expands, relationships must either rise to meet you or fall away. Both outcomes serve you. You're no longer bending yourself to fit into spaces that have stopped appreciating your presence. Another important aspect of self-expansion is that it removes resentment. When you're actively growing, you don't sit in frustration wondering why someone changed. You're too focused on where you're going. Growth gives you direction, and direction dissolves bitterness. People often ask why growth brings respect back. The answer is simple: growth signals options. A person who is expanding doesn't look trapped, they look chosen. And being chosen is far more attractive than trying to be needed. Whether the other person steps forward or not becomes secondary. The real win is that you've moved beyond the need for their validation. You've outgrown the version of yourself that felt overlooked. And when you grow past the place where someone stopped valuing you, you either regain their respect or realize you no longer need it. When someone begins to take you for granted, the instinctive response is usually extreme. You either pull away completely to protect your pride, or you lean in harder hoping to restore connection. Both reactions miss the real source of power. Strength doesn't come from distance or pursuit alone, it comes from discernment. Responding only when it aligns with your standards quietly reshapes the dynamic without conflict. Standards are not rules you announce, they're principles you live by. When your responses are automatic, predictable, and driven by availability rather than alignment, you teach others how to treat you. Over time, they learn that your attention is unconditional. That's when value begins to fade. Responding selectively doesn't mean ignoring or playing games. It means pausing long enough to ask whether engagement makes sense for you. Are they meeting you with respect? Is their effort consistent? Does their behavior align with what you want in your life? If the answer is unclear, restraint becomes the most self-respecting response. Many people respond out of habit, not intention. A message arrives and they reply immediately without considering context. This reflexive behavior gives away leverage. It communicates that access to you requires no effort. When you slow down and respond intentionally, you restore balance. From the outside, selective response looks like confidence. You're not rushing. You're not over-explaining. You're not trying to regain attention. You're simply engaging when it feels right. That calm self-trust is attractive because it signals internal authority. Another key element is emotional neutrality. Responding from standards means your tone doesn't change based on how you're being treated. You don't become sarcastic when effort drops, and you don't become overly enthusiastic when attention returns. You remain steady, This steadiness communicates that your boundaries are internal, not reactive. This approach also prevents emotional exhaustion. Constant engagement with someone who isn't valuing you drains energy and clarity. By responding selectively, you conserve both. You create space to observe rather than react. Observation reveals patterns. Patterns reveal truth. Over time, this forces clarity into the dynamic. If someone values you, they adjust their behavior to meet your level. If they don't, their lack of effort becomes obvious. Either way, you're no longer guessing. You're responding to reality, not hope. Responding only when behavior aligns with your standards also builds self-respect. Every aligned response reinforces your sense of worth. You stop betraying yourself for the sake of connection. And self-respect, once restored, changes how others perceive you. It's important to understand that standards don't push people away, misalignment does. When someone steps back because your standards are clear, it's not a loss, it's confirmation. The real power move isn't distance or pursuit, it's consistency with your values. When your responses reflect who you are and what you expect, the dynamic either elevates or ends, and both outcomes serve you. And that's when you realize you were never trying to control them, you were simply learning to honor yourself. When someone no longer values you, the strongest move you can make is often the one that feels the hardest, letting go of the outcome. Most people stay emotionally stuck because they're trying to force a specific result, to be chosen, to be appreciated, to be treated the way they once were. That attachment keeps them trapped in anxiety and overreaction. Detachment, on the other hand, creates clarity and restores power. Detaching doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop gripping. You release the need to control how someone feels, what they decide, or whether they stay. The moment you accept that you cannot manage another person's perception, your energy returns to you. And when your energy returns, your presence changes. Power always flows toward the person who needs less. When you detach from the outcome, you're no longer bargaining with your self-worth. You're not adjusting your behavior to earn approval. You're standing in your value regardless of what happens next. That steadiness is felt immediately, even if it's never acknowledged. Most people confuse detachment with emotional coldness. In reality, true detachment is calm and grounded. You're still respectful, you're still authentic, but you're no longer emotionally dependent on validation. You allow space without resentment and connection without expectation. This balance removes pressure from the dynamic. When pressure disappears, truth surfaces. If someone genuinely values you, they step forward naturally. They don't need to be chased or convinced. If they don't, detachment prevents you from wasting time trying to revive something that no longer exists. Either way, the fog clears. Detachment also sharpens perception. Without the fear of loss clouding your judgment, you start seeing patterns clearly. You notice consistency, effort, and intent without filtering them through hope. This clarity allows you to respond wisely instead of emotionally. From the other person's perspective, detachment changes the dynamic. They sense that you're no longer trying to hold on. That freedom can either invite respect or create distance. Both outcomes are honest, and honesty is what ultimately serves you. Letting go of the outcome also protects your dignity. You're not issuing ultimatums or making emotional declarations. You're simply allowing reality to unfold. A man who can accept any outcome without resentment carries quiet strength. He doesn't chase closure or demand explanations. He trusts himself enough to move forward. This mindset also ensures that you win regardless of the result. If the connection improves, it's because both people chose it freely. If it ends, you walk away intact. You don't lose yourself trying to save something that required your self-betrayal. The trick was never about making them come back or value you again. It was about reclaiming your center. When you detach from the outcome, you stop negotiating with uncertainty and start living from self-respect. And in that moment, whether they stay or leave becomes secondary because you've already chosen yourself.